Welcome, everyone, to Wizards and Warp Drives, the podcast where three grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the things they love. My name is Nacho, and joining me, as per usual, is Fred from How to RPG, and the mighty glue stick himself, Mr. AJ Pickett.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, good morning.
You started this podcast halfway through a mouthful of food. That was not fair.
Yeah, it was funny though. I was watching you trying to get it down.
How's everyone's week been?
Oh, it's a new year. It's 2025. We're in some strange alternate universe. Apparently, this is the good timeline. It can get worse. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a good game of Shadow Dark last night. My players continue on their campaign and achieved a bit more, and now level 3, so they're quite happy. Got some good feedback. The day job was shite, and I'm glad I only have to do all 3 days of it, and would like to chop that down to 2. That's where my head is at. Other than that, I have 2 more days off. So, yeah.
This has been the first year in many years where YouTube has not given me an absolute throwaway of a January. So my view counts and stuff have actually been pretty good. I don't know why that is, possibly because of all the bad weather over in the States, forcing everybody to watch my long-form videos. Who knows? Maybe I'm just lucking out with good content. It's a ring toss. One interesting thing is I got the first draft of the layout for the Super Atomic RPG back, and it's looking good. We've got some extra stuff to add in there and some things to tweak, but it's pretty close. I'd say it's about, 70% done. We've got to add in the artwork and stuff after we've determined where all the words are going to go. That's on track.
Yeah, what was that thing you sent me? That song? It's pretty catchy.
Yeah, I made a little theme song for Super Atomic. Yeah.
Nice.
Just to keep me inspired.
Yeah, I had a nice week. Yeah, works. I'm doing performance reviews at the moment, which isn't fun. But as you guys know, I've been diving back into the Dragonlance novels over the last year and a half. And there's over 200 of them, so it's a little bit overwhelming. So I joined a book club on Facebook, and Margaret Weiss actually commented on one of my posts, and I sent her after I talked to AJ and found out a little bit, I sent her a nice message because, Dragonlance is the reason I got into fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons, so it is a informative book. So that was nice. After being so disappointed last weekend about gaming, it was nice to actually get some positive sort of creative. Yeah, so I was buzzing off that.
I'd always been a bit sad that I hadn't read much Neil Gaiman. Now I'm not.
Yeah. What sucks is I'm currently, because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and he has a great voice. And I'm halfway through the Sandman audio dramatizations, which were really well produced, really good, with some really good actors. But he does the main narration, and now I just can't finish those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so... Yeah.
You know how I feel when we talk about the OGL and how disappointed I was with Wizards of the Coast. Kind of the same sort of thing. Your heart gets broken by a content creator.
All right, let's go into something amusing, somewhat more positive. Let's talk about,
Let's talk about the best movie of all goddamn time.
We are going to talk about a movie that comes up a lot in the podcast. We are going to talk about 1991's Highlander 2, The Quickening.
That's right. That does come up a lot. I've forgotten. It's quite often off camera too. No, it's Krull. We talk about Krull a lot.
Krull!
Yeah. There's a lot of love for Krull, and there's also a lot of laughter about Krull, and there's a lot of frustration.
First of all, we're not
Krull
talking about anything to do with Kevin Sorbo and Krull the Conqueror. That is not. No. Krull. See, that's with a Krull and a sh. And something that looks like a teenager in a metalwork class going crazy, flick knife, going flying past us. Yes, the deadly boomerang, the completely unsafe weapon.
Yeah. It's the knife. The knives on the end of a throwing star, the size of a frisbee.
Yeah, somebody made a flick shuriken.
It's not. Watching it, because I've just literally watched it, and at the time, it's one of the coolest weapons. It is literally a shuriken with blades.
Yeah.
But in this day and age, it actually looks like a fidget spinner.
Yes, it looks exactly like, yeah. It is one of the most impractical and silly weapons ever invented. But I mean, as magical flying weapons go, it's got a bit of merit to it, as we'll see.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about Krull. 1983, directed by Peter Yates. Screenwriter was Stanford Sherman, with the original score composed by James Horner, starring Ken Marshall, Liznette Anthony, Freddie Jones, Francisco Annis, Alan Armstrong, and a very young Liam Neeson and Robbie Coltrane. A prince and his fellowship of companions set out to rescue his bride from a fortress of alien invaders who arrive on their home planet of Krull. All right.
That's right. So the movie starts off very Star Wars, with it's essentially James Horner's intro soundtrack, and it's a brilliant soundtrack. And this is the first time I ever heard James Horner, and you hear elements of this soundtrack through all of his work after that, including Star Trek: Wrath of Khan and all sorts of other famous stuff.
Yeah, did Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, Aliens, Willow, The Rocketeer, Braveheart, Apollo 13, The Mask of Zorro, Titanic, and Avatar.
Yeah, we lost a great when he passed away. So the movie starts off with a great big super asteroid fortress arriving in planetary orbit, turning very ponderously and just plunging straight down and landing on the surface of the planet and causing tectonic impact as it cracks. And it's kind of like the Dark Crystal Castle landing and cracking the landscape like that. It's sci-fi and fantasy at the same time, right from the get-go.
It was really weird. I remember watching that scene and I'm like, what am I watching? Is that a spaceship? Is that just a giant rock hurtling towards a planet that's going to impact it and cause a great, huge, wipe everything out on the planet? I'm like, I don't know. And then it lands, and then we discover it's a fortress, it's a spaceship, and it's full of the Beast and his army of slayers that are invading Krull.
Yep.
And unfortunately, even as a 12-year-old watching this movie, I could have figured that out in the first 5 minutes without the fucking narrator telling me all this shit. I have a beef with that narrator. Yeah.
It does start with the prophecy, where the narrator speaks the prophecy of the king and the queen will rule the world, and their son will eventually go on to rule the galaxy.
And that's Freddie Jones, the guy who plays Ymir in the old one, the sage, or he's basically me in the movie.
He's Timu version of Obi-Wan.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And he's describing it, yeah, but it's like a premise setup that was, I think, storyboarded with the original idea of the movie, and then there were so many edits and changes and stuff. It became much more fantasy as the production went on. But there's still those elements of sci-fi-ness to them. So galaxy and space and all that sort of stuff. And they are alien invaders. This is a story about alien invasion.
Yeah. The thing that this movie is almost passable as a movie if they had just at least taken out the narration in this film, because the narration is, I'm swearing for a good reason. It's incredibly annoying and frustrating to contend with, even as a young teenager. It's overused constantly. It's completely unnecessary. You can watch this movie without the sodding narrator telling stuff. Like, it literally gives away the end of the movie. And it has the most clunky phrasing.
It's because they wanted a Star Wars, and this is their attempt at an opening crawler.
Yeah, so it was a cinematic tradition at the time that they brought into. That was unnecessary. You're right.
I'll go through the plot, shall I?
And can I just say one more thing about the narrator? That the use of the prophecy is really, really bad. Like, prophecies are always bad in stories, okay? Because they essentially tell you the end of the story, unless the prophecy is a false prophecy and leads you down the garden path. This prophecy is not leading you down the garden path. It's leaned on so much. It literally presents the audience early on, right at the very beginning, and the outcome of the entire story. I feel like the narration, the prophecy stuff, if they got rid of that, a lot of the rest of what you're about to explain, Nacho, would have been perfectly fine.
There is one thing though. The identification that this planet is not Earth. It is called Krull. It is an alien planet. I mean, it's not necessary for like. I don't think any of the characters in the story name the planet or the fact that it's not Earth. You could forgive them for saying, like this is a fictional, like, with the Princess Bride, how they had sort of fictional kingdoms and things like that. So they wanted to establish right from the beginning that this is an alien world and that the people on this world are not human. This is very important when you get to the bit where Colwyn retrieves the glaive, and also what actually kills the beast in the end in the long run, which is they have elemental powers. Inherent elemental powers to resist getting burnt to death.
Yeah,
Otherwise, a couple of very important parts of this movie would not work.
Look, all it requires is for Colful, or when they meet in that castle, for them to say the only way to save Krull is to band together, to join together in an alliance. And we would have known all we needed to know. It's a different world. It's not Earth. It's something else. That's all we needed. We did not need Freddy. We did not need Freddy doing the narration. Anyway, Nacho, go for it. Tell the story.
What also would have been awesome if there was behind the castle and stuff, just in the background, like a matte drawing, a ruined starship. Like the humans came to Krull originally from somewhere else. That would have been awesome. But no.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, it was actually the beast was actually called Krull, and the planet was going to be called Beast World, but they swapped it around at the last minute in script writing.
Wow.
So
yeah, Krull was the dragon.
Yeah, it was originally a dragon. They changed that, but we'll get there.
It would have been better as a dragon, I think, maybe.
The planet Krull is invaded by the Beast and his army of Slayers, who travel in a mountain-like spaceship known as the Black Fortress. Meanwhile, Prince Colwyn, that's such a fucking terrible name,
Colwyn,
and Princess Lissa plan to marry to unite their kingdoms against the Beast. However, before the wedding is completed, the Slayers attack, destroying the Krull armies, wounding Colwyn and kidnapping Lissa. Do you know what stood out in this watch for me, this particular scene? And I never noticed it before. This was really like Errol Flynn, Robin Hood, like with the badly choreographed like sort of fighting scene and the chandelier and sort of running up and down the stairs and like no, like my dad. I got to choose between my dad and my future bride, and I don't know. I just got real.
It was
this film,
really look. If they got Errol Flynn, we would have been better off. But this was not good because Ken is not Errol Flynn, and the rest of the people in here are not good at whatever the heck they're up to. But they
there's a lot of what I would call masculinity in this movie that's probably fueled by a fair amount of cocaine, and certainly his ability, like Ken's ability to climb mountains and his mountain climbing thing at the time is certainly taken advantage of in this movie. And the fact that he wants to leap off and swing around on anything is pretty much testament to the fact that he was very athletic.
Those aren't mountain climbing pants he's wearing.
Well, I mean,
tight pants, man.
Those you go to a nightclub with those suckers.
I mean, you try going up a slope with some stretch leather pants. It actually works pretty well.
Yeah. I just think it's amusing that the Beast decided to kidnap Lissa and then marry her, and like the Beast is the Beast is the Beast, man. Like you got nothing going for you. She's 17 years old. She ain't gonna be interested in you at all. But anyway, keep going.
Anyway, so Colwyn is held by Yearn. Is it how you say the name? The old one, Freddie Jones, who tells him that only the glaive, a magical 5-pointed weapon, can defeat the Beast. Colwyn has to go retrieve it from a mountain cave, where he basically has to put his hand in some hot lava without even like.
It's always a question, isn't it? Like, is that lava, or is that just really hot water, or is that?
No, his hand catches on fire.
Is it literally? You look at it and like it's see through. It's transparent lava. Oh, hang on, maybe it's really hot, see through Jello. that he stuck his hand in there and didn't burn in the slightest. He's perfectly fine. It's supposed to, I guess, represent drawing the sword from the stone. It's supposed to have that element to it.
Yeah, the ones that up the stakes. The
Yeah,
stone's
up the
on
stakes.
fire. Yeah, the stone is melted.
But
Yeah.
I guess they didn't quite establish in the head of some people, including myself, that in this world playing with fire is not a bad thing, because they stick it in water, they draw it out of water, they can hold it in their hands, and they can pass it on to somebody else. So we should have expected that Colwyn is pretty much fireproof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't explain that this is magical. This is magic. You know, you just, in this case, Fred, they're not giving you the introduction. They're just showing you. We kind of like in a rock and a hard place. Do we want to have things explained to us, or do we want to just immerse ourselves in the world?
Yeah, I'm not giving them a hard time with this. I think this is more a product of, unless you understand that there's something about Lyssa and Colwyn, is that they're elemental in some way, and quite a lot of them are. So yeah. Playing with fire is not
all I remember as a kid, and this is the impression that I got when I first saw that scene fresh, is that I was not expecting that. It looked like an impossible situation, and it was just pure bravery, like pure faith, right? That to put his hand in lava to take the thing out, trusting that he was going to die. That was the premise of the thing. Is like, you will go up there and get it. What happens if I don't get it? You won't come back at all, is what. And it's like, he wasn't fighting any monsters or anything. He had two choices: either get smashed to pieces by rocks on the mountain, which is the first danger that he faces, aside from, getting shot and stuff. We've also established that Ynir has got like magical healing salve that just like wounds heal overnight, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that when he gets to the cave, there's going to be some sort of a test. It's a hero's journey icon. And we established that he is not normal. He is fated. He is a king, and he has the power through his faith and through his connection with Glaive to ignore physical constraints of other people, and it's magical and it chose him, sort of thing. And when he takes it out, what I like is that it's got stuff coated all off it that just falls away from the thing. It's like, it was sitting in lava. That must be pretty good at getting rid of,
There's an edit I noticed as well. So when he's holding it, he's actually holding it with the blade. Like, if the blades came out, they'd go through his palm. And they show he's holding it up, and then they cut back, and they've slightly moved it, so they've slightly realised that the blades pop out.
Yeah, it's an incredibly dangerous item to use personally. Like if you had it in real life.
Yeah, their love burns hot. That's that's the message of this thing. So, Ewan also explains to Colwyn that the Black Fortress.
Let's get his name correct, okay? It's YNYR. There's no vowels. That's why you confuse. It's Y, N, YR is Ynir. It's Ynir.
Okay.
Ynir. It's Ynir.
Yeah, just think of it as an E.
Ynir. I mean, his name is shit.
It's like Tyre. Tyre has got a Y in the middle of it. We don't get confused about that. So it's Ynir, maybe. Ynir.
Freddie Jones explains that the Black Fortress teleports every sunrise. We're fucking having AJ give me shit about pronunciation. Because there's some worse names coming up.
I already suggested you just call him by his name. Yes. Freddie the wise one.
Yeah, so we get some lore about the Black Fortress. It moves around, which is really cool. Along the way, they are joined by Ergo the Magnificent and a group of 9 thieves led by Torgil and young Liam Neeson and Robbie Coltrane.
The casting in this movie is so on point. Like the characters that they chose for these roles, they just slot into that perfectly.
Except for one. And unfortunately, that actor shares my name. Freddie must die.
He was so he came from like quite a storied career. I don't know if he'd done June before or after this. I think it was before this, maybe. But he was one of those guys like Patrick Stewart, who speaks with a Shakespearean voice. Like he speaks like he's on stage, and that's why it kind of leads credence to right from the very start where he's healing Colwyn, and Colwyn's all depressed, and he he's disgusted with him, and he walks away, and you're like, you haven't lost a wife and a father in one day, and he's like, nor have I become king on that day. And it's just like he pronounces that right to Colwyn's soul, like, you are a king now. You're not a normal person anymore. You can't whine like a boy.
Generation Z stuff.
Generation, yeah. Well, I mean, I always came, that line and that particular scene always came across. I'm like, you're a wanker, mate.
He is, yeah.
He's an utter wanker.
Yep.
Good that he died, but anyway, let's keep going.
He's obviously.
I agree with a lot. The casting for a lot of these characters was really well done.
Yeah, he's not
they
Gandalf.
Are good actors.
He's not
really
Gandalf,
good.
that's for sure.
I think he's more meant to be Obi-Wan in my way of looking at it. Well, that's what they were going for anyway. So,
anyway,
this is also where I get a lot of Robin the Hood vibes from this film now.
Also, Ynir is a former adventurer, basically, because he's got a lot of backstory and plot in this thing. With the whole Widow of the Web thing, we get a whole backstory for Ynir. So he's not an empty character. He's well established that he's got resources of his own. He's kind of like a wizard in the same sense that Gandalf doesn't really do a lot of flashy wizard stuff, but he's wise. He knows alchemy. He knows the history of the world. He's got a lot of magical connections, and he's Colwyn's basically plot device that allows him to find the solution.
He's an exposition machine of this world. So
he's the quest giver.
One thing I do want to say is, Colwyn, he had a pretty shit day. He lost his wife, he lost his dad. Fucking 2 hours later, mate, he found a magic weapon, and he's like busting quips out, giving people shit, laughing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what the effect it would have on me after I put my hand in lava and lived, but I imagine it'd be like skydiving or bungee jumping. He'd be pretty uplifted afterwards. As adventure sports go, it's pretty hardcore.
What do you guys think of Ergo the Magnificent? He was one of my favorites as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Such quotable lines like, it's a small name, but adequate,
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a big man, so I need a big name.
Yeah.
Ergo the Magnificent, wide of vision, narrow of purpose. Yeah, it's a great line.
Yeah. Also should mention that the Cyclops kind of pops in here as well, hanging out in the background, Rel, who later joins them. So the group go to see the Admiral Seer, who uses his crystals to locate the fortress. However, the beast crushes the crystals with his magic, and he has to go. He then tells them that they need to go to the swamp, because apparently the beast magic don't penetrate the swamp. Darrow is killed by a slayer, and Menno dies in the quicksand. There's a lot of quicksand in this film, a lot more than I remember. And a changeling agent kills the seer and assumes his identity, only to be discovered and killed by Real the Cyclops. This is the scene that really cemented in my memory. I don't know why. That particular scene when the slayers rise out of the lake. I don't know why I've always...
Probably good because the actors paid such a heavy price to bring you that scene.
Yeah, it just looks cool, man. And can we also mention like the Slayer's costume? And it's never explained what are like when they die, that scream and that like slug thing.
Yeah. So on the one hand, they're stormtroopers, basically. They use that same trick of like you can just reuse the same actors by just putting them in a suit. And also they wanted to impress on the fact that these are alien invaders. They're not humanoid, normal humanoids. So they were almost walking around in sort of robot bodies. And the premise is that you kill these things, they make a horrible screeching sound, their head breaks open, and then some horrible parasite ghouls, creepy thing, comes slithering out of their head in a wet, red internal organ gloop, and then sinks into the ground like some sort of a worm, and presumably goes back to base to regenerate. I don't know. But yeah, it was creepy and horrible, and effective.
I always feel like when people make references to the Slayers in this movie and Stormtroopers, I'm like, Stormtroopers are cool, but Slayers are cooler. Do you know what I mean? You can't say that the Slayer garb is just reproducing a stormtrooper in any way, because it's so different.
Well, they can't shoot for shit, and they have white uniforms in the palace.
Well, see, some of them aren't. Some of them are actually dark coloured. you know.
Yeah,
And
most of them are
colours go
dark
wild.
colored until you get to the royal ones, the Imperial Palace ones. In
Yeah.
which case, similar to Star Wars, in that you got the red suited guards of the Emperor.
Yeah. The bad guys use lasers and the good guys use swords.
Yeah, they're not really lasers though. They're mass conversion. Like they're actually shooting a spear that's energized. So it actually makes a lot more sense in an energy weapon. And it's really well thought out actually, because it's a practical melee weapon, but also a ranged weapon as well. So it's like a crossbow that shoots a super energized bolt. That's like an energy bolt. It just goes straight through you.
Yeah, they kind of fire it and then they flick it around and they've got the sword.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Which is also like the staff weapons that the warriors use in Stargate.
Yeah. When I rented this film off iTunes, and I was really surprised. It's a G. This film was classified as a G on iTunes, and this goes fucking hard for a G, man.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not show this to a little kid.
No, and that scene with the seer gets taken over, that is so creepy when his nails grow really long and he goes kind of into his back, and yes, it's just some really disturbing imagery.
Yeah. Or even just when he's doing the whole vision thing, though. So they first of all, on their way to the seer, they meet up with a bunch of bandits. They go through an ambush spot, and it's unsure whether it was deliberate, but Colwyn basically takes over and uses his kingly charisma and the fact that he is the king, and he has the keys to the locks. He's got the key. Yeah, so only the king and his lord marshal carry the key that will release prisoners, which is kind of silly, but And then he's like, I am that king. And he's like, oh, you're about the same age as Colwyn, the king's son. And he's like, yes, that I'm him. And they all are like not very impressed. They're like, they follow me and I follow no man at all, is his line. And he says, don't unlock my chains. I'll die with them.
There's a really cool line that's delivered in that scene where he goes on about prophecies. You can't live off a prophecy. You'll starve.
Fame. Yeah. Fame. Seek it, you'll go mad. Eat it, you'll go hungry. Yeah.
It's a very, very cool line. So after that, we learn, so that's basically like he meets the Merry Men, Robin Hood's Merry Men.
And the Merry Men happens to have Robbie Coltrane as basically their Friar Tuck, who just has like a couple of lines, but they're really good ones. It's like, can't a man even complain in peace, without being hassled? And they're all in it for the money, basically. But the only one who really sort of is heroic is the youngest kind of Will Scarlet, who steps up and says, I'll join you. And all the others are kind of shame. And he says, the boy shames you all. And unlocks
he's got
him.
Terrible haircut.
Yeah, he does. It's very typical of the time in England, though.
Bold.
Yeah, and of course we have Liam Neeson as well, and probably the first time anybody's ever seen Liam Neeson in a movie. And
he's rocking Jedi, like a Jedi rat's tail thing as well.
Yeah. Yep. And later on in the movie, in a very pivotal scene before the pivotal scene, where they're gathering these particular horses, there's very, very hardcore physical, no stunt doubles acting going on, where those guys could have got seriously injured. They're basically running around a scree slope on quite steep sides, jumping at full-grown, unrestrained Clydesdale horses who are milling around, clomping their hooves. And let me tell you, those things are tremendously strong, very big horses, and they are not the most agile things you've ever seen. So if they stand on your foot, they will break your foot.
So I did actually see a bit more about that scene, so I know a little bit more about what actually happened. So it's not quite as accurate as you might think.
Okay.
There were definitely stunt men involved, yeah.
So, speaking of Liam Neeson, we learn that he has 9 wives. So he's a man whore, and they go to one of his villages to rest after this, where the beast uses another changeling to try and seduce Colwyn and make Lyssa believes that he no longer loves her. But Colwyn rejects the changeling, and Lyssa, through the vision from the beast, reaffirms the belief that love is overpowering. And despite this, the beast still forces her to consider marrying him to stop the Slayer's invasion.
Yeah, Liam Neeson's character is kind of like a sailor with a lady in every port, but there's no sailing and there's no mention of oceans in this, so Maybe it's a big
Yeah.
landlocked world, and he's just the equivalent of a pirate.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that Liam Neeson is apparently quite well hung. So
He's a big man.
yeah. Anyway, he's got a particular set of skills.
G-rated, folks.
All right, keep going.
Freddie Jones then tells them they need to go seek the widow of the web, an enchantress who he once was in love with, and she will reveal where the fortress will be at sunrise, and gives him enchanted sand from an hourglass to keep him alive. This scene terrified me as a kid.
Yeah.
He returns to the group, but the sand runs out, and he dies after sharing the fortress's location. This was, I guess, they were going for the Shelob creepy vibe here. I don't know.
No, they weren't going for the Shelob because this was before that.
Well, not before the books.
Not
well,
before
no, it's the widow. So the idea of the paying the price to the Sirius or the witch, essentially. So she's kind of like a witch. Is she's cursed? That's the premise of why she's there. She's basically done it to herself. So she cursed herself when Ynea was. Her and Ynea were basically like Colwyn and Lyssa in this story. She's also got the name Lyssa. And when he was adventuring, she was his love interest, but he had obligations to King and Crown or whatever, and left her. And in her rage and frustration, she killed his son. And to punish herself for that, she basically went to commit suicide in the spider's lair. And for whatever reason, she became cocooned in the middle of its lair as its master and also its prisoner. And the rules of the web are she can turn the hourglass of sand, which is her life force, inside the hourglass to stop the spider once as the sands wind down. That magic still is unbreakable because it's part of her curse. And the only way she can get around that is to break the glass and give the sand to Freddie, basically giving her life, and he has her borrowed time. So he's spending her life because she gets killed immediately by the spider as soon as the sand leaves. He is then using it to protect himself, and by the time he gets back to Colwyn, he can't stop the flow of the sand from his hand because it's a magical property, and he's fated to die, and he dies right before he gives them the answer, and he shouts it as soon as he gets back to the camp. It's sunrise, the black murders, and then he passes out, falls off the thing.
The widow of the web, you could have made a whole movie just about that thing.
Yeah.
It's got so many metaphors going on, so much, I guess, fairy tale tragedy tied to it. It could have been easily its own story. It was a really impressive scene, and they had all sorts of plans for that scene actually. That did involve the spider dying and Colwell coming to Yo-Yo's rescue, Freddy's rescue, and taking the spider out with the glaive. But they just they ran into cost issues, and they had to trim things back, and so things get simplified. And but anyway, keep going.
In the end, it's a pretty tight scene, and it's really, really well animated. And of course, the musical score just makes that so much better. With that screaming female choir, just gets you right on the nerve endings, and it's so alien and weird and treacherous. Like, he's not only climbing across a sheer drop across these strands of web with all sorts of detritus and stuff with it, so he can't really see where he's going. The pacing of it is really important too, because he's being literally chased by a giant crystalline spider, which is creepy as hell. So you feel that fear for him. And then realizing that, not only that, but at the end of it, he's not only racing against the spider, but he's racing for his very life at the end to get away. Yeah, and he sacrificed everything.
This film has got amazing vistas. It reminds me, when your computer goes to sleep and you get those Google wallpapers, just like, it's like that, but with a swirling James Horner score going in the background. It is,
So Freddie, when he was climbing along those cables in the web, had to do that for real. There was no stunt double. It was just him, and they couldn't attach a safety harness. And for the life of me, I don't understand why they did not put a net underneath, but apparently there was no net underneath him either. So, he's, I think, 65 in this movie, and he's trying to clamber across these cables with all these spider webs and act and not screw it up and hurt himself.
I'd do it. In a heartbeat. I'd do it. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. This movie's pretty hardcore.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay, so the group then rides magical fire mirrors to reach the Black Fortress. Upon arriving, they face an intense battle. Rune is killed, and Rel sacrifices himself to hold open the fortress's doors so that others can enter. Quain, Nenog, and Keegan also perish during their journey through the fortress, and Ergo transforms himself to a tiger to save Titch from a slayer. So, yeah, I guess throughout this, Ergo there's a couple of things that really stand out here is like the Firemere journey, the sacrifice, and also Ergo is kind of portrayed as a bumbling wizard throughout this that can't really do very good magic tricks. He's always fucking
he can't
it up.
cast the hill people can't cast magic on others. They can only cast it on themselves, which is really interesting. So he uses it basically polymorphing all through the movie by basically just using a blending style frame by frame transition, which is really hard to do and doesn't look very good to this day. But it was pretty cool at the time. He does do some nice stuff. So he establishes he's kind of a dick. He's kind of like he's a narcissist, but he also has a heart of gold because he transforms himself. He asks the boy Titch, what he wishes for, and he says, "I wish for a puppy." And he's like, "Just a puppy?" And he's like, "Oh, well, I can do that." So he, on the one hand, he's transforming himself into a puppy to please the child, but on the other hand, he's also being carried by the child the entire way, in the form of a puppy. So he's just lazy.
He does that after the seer dies to cheer him up. But and Titch knows it's him as well, so that is a really sweet moment. Yeah, and that also
establishes that there's a reason why Rel likes him and calls him a friend. And Rel's story is really good, and also it's another character with a cursed background, and establishes a background for the world that the Cyclops are not from Krull; they're from another planet, and so they're aliens too. And their story is on their world, the Beast made a bargain with them to allow them to see the future in exchange for one of their eyes, and unfortunately he cheated them, and the only future they could see is their death. And they have a choice to make. They can either accept their fate and die peacefully, or they can rail against their fate and die painfully every time. That's the premise. And so Rel has a choice to make during the movie, and he decides to depart their company and accept his fate and die peacefully. And they all accept that. And Ergo says, "We had no time." He wanted to be a friend for life, and moves on. I think that's one of the best parting phrases I've ever heard. We had no time. It was very, very, very sincere, very poignant. But in a famous scene, as they get to the climbing up the side of the fortress, just as it's about to teleport away, and they're all going to get abandoned because they're not inside, and they're getting picked off by the Slayers, and it seems hopeless. Rel appears on the horizon, riding a fire mare, making it look like a goddamn pony, pushing the goddamn thing. I've never seen anybody literally force a horse to gallop faster. It's hilarious because the guy is huge. It makes it Clydesdale look like a normal horse, and it's him powering across it. At Nacho will tell you the speed of this thing to the rescue essentially, and it's just like it's fantastic. It's one of the best scenes in movies.
Yeah, and we discover that he's pretty much impervious to Slayer lightning bolts.
Well, he's not. He's going to die, but he knows he's going to die, so he's accepting any injury. So he's essentially a fanatical. He's accepted his death, and so he's the ultimate hero. He's not going to stop. And he knows he knows exactly he's going to die, and he knows that that's not a fatal wound. That's not a fatal wound because that's not how I die. I die up there in that doorway. He knows where he's going. Yeah. And so he leads them directly to it, and they're all just like, shit, follow. Yeah. And get behind him. Yeah. So
it's probably one of the most crushing scenes.
Literally.
It's the Cyclops gets crushed, and in the movie you're watching and you're like, Oh my gosh! It's because one of my favorite characters, and watching his death was just heart
Yeah.
squishing. Like, oh no, not him! And yeah, and the way that he dies, and they're all desperately trying to save him, and it's just there's nothing they can do.
I'd be tempted to make a T-shirt with a picture of him in the doorway, just with his eye and his hand sticking out, saying, "I got such a crush on Rel, the original hero."
Who's the original Hodor?
Yeah, he is. He is the Hodor.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, this is my favorite part of the film. The whole Firemere entering the castle scene. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, and his costume design is amazing. Like, it still holds up.
Yeah,
it looks really good. So I guess we enter the final confrontation where Kelwyn and his remaining allies reach a large dome inside the fortress. Kelwyn finally finds Larissa. He attacks the beast with the glaive, which becomes embedded into the beast's body. Without a weapon to defend himself, Larissa and Kelwyn complete their wedding ritual. This grants them the power to control fire, and they use that to defeat the beast. The beast's death then frees Torgal and Oswin. They reunite, and the survivors escape the crumbling fortress, which is pulled back into space. And then the narrator repeats the far out. I can't talk.
Prophecy.
Repeats the prophecy, confirming that the son of Kelwyn and Lissa will one day rule the galaxy.
Yeah. So I really like the combination of the set and costume design in regards to the Slayer Fortress. The dome matches the dome sort of helmet head piece, like the helmets of the Slayers are rounded, very rounded, and they have those spiked collars up around the outside, which sort of matches the architecture in the inside of the fortress, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, and just the general organic nature of the set design and things, and how things just sort of looked like bones and spikes and things. So it literally is a reflection of the beast and his body. And it was a consistent factor throughout the movie, which I thought was really good.
Yeah. Did you get Empire Strikes Back vibes with the glaive scene? In the Wampa Cave where he's trying to reach for the lightsaber and it's stuck.
Very much.
That force powers.
Yeah.
So this movie, for all its really unusual as a movie. Let's get real. It was really unusual. Had a starting budget of $20 million, which is a lot of money to be putting into a film at that time. But I think they estimate that it cost between finally $47 million to $50 million to make this thing.
Yeah.
And the exact amount of money in terms of its cost is not well established. It's very hard to find anything that sort of says pinpoint this is it, but it's in that range.
Yeah, to give you some idea, the entire one of the big studios at Pinewood Studios was transformed into that swamp scene. It was freezing cold, bitter English winter, so cold, wet, and they didn't have heating inside that set. They had basically a pond with sawdust and water in the middle, and kind of treacherous sandy terrain around the outside of it. The characters, the actors didn't know exactly where the edge of the water was, and they kept falling in. They were cold and wet.
So did the crew.
Yeah, so did the entire crew.
16 or 17 people fell into that pond because they couldn't see it.
Right.
It was also covered in bits of cork.
Yeah, like the sawdusty stuff. So it was a horrible bloody situation there, and just to get that effect of like making it look authentic, and it really does. It looks quite fantastic.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, but that was not. There's no CGI in this movie. It's all practical effects, and it's one of the last great fantasy practical effect movies. Yeah,
I think it only earned $16 million at the box office because it was competing with Return of the Jedi at the time.
It was competing with a lot of movies. It wasn't just Return of the Jedi. There were a whole bunch of movies playing at exactly the same time. And when I went to saw this, we'd seen Return of the Jedi. And then we.
Oh, you saw it at the cinema? Yeah,
I did.
Wow.
And when I went to see the movie with, I think it was my Uncle Grant, insisted we go and see this movie. He said, "This is going to be cool, Fred." So we went to see this because he said, this is like high fantasy science fiction. This is kind of like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. He said, I grew up on Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. I want this. So we went and saw it. But the worldwide profit for Krull is actually unknown.
Yeah.
And the only profit for this movie is listed as $16.9 million or 16.5, depending on where you look. And that is for the American domestic profit and the Canadian domestic profit. The rest of the world, we have really no idea, but Krull is considered a financial flop, a pretty impressive one, but not the worst case of a financial flop. There are some movies that have come out since then that have earned that right far more than Krull has, fortunately.
Let me give you an example of the movies that it was competing with in 1983, okay? Just to give you some idea of the greatness that was released in this movie. We had Silkwood and Scarface. We had The Right Stuff. We had War Games. We had Star Wars Return of the Jedi. We had Vacation, National Lampoon's Vacation. We had Monty Python's Meaning of Life. The Outsiders. Just Terms of Endearment, Trading Places, the Evil Dead movie. Just tons and tons of really great movies. Blue Thunder, Bad Boys, Dead Zone, Twilight Zone, the movie, Videodrome, The Big Chill, Rumblefish, Local Hero, Valley Girl. Tons and tons of really, really great movies.
Yeah.
Flashdance, Christine.
I gave
Octopussy, James Bond.
$5 last night.
Right,
So
right.
I've added $5 to the pool.
Yeah, and fantasy movies, we had Fire and Ice that was released at that as well. Lone Wolf McCade, Strange Brew. Lots of movies.
I had gone and seen Return of the Jedi. Then we went and saw Octopussy because it had the name Pussy and there were ladies on the cover.
Such a terrible name.
That's what we saw at the movie. That was what our family saw at the movies that year, was Octopussy.
Never Say Never was also playing at the same time.
Oh, so when we had the competing Bond films? Is that when we had? Is that the same year that we had both a Moore and a Connery?
We saw that, and then they were like, we should go to another movie. What's playing? And Krull was the next choice in the sort of list of movies we went through around that time. So we would, let's go see Krull. We'd been, we'd had a good time with Octopussy. Never Say Never was all right. Return of the Jedi was awesome. And so we went to Krull, and I will tell you our response at the end of this. I won't tell you that at the end just yet. But let's talk a little bit about behind the camera, because you were referring to the actors with those Clydesdales. There were actually stunt doubles. The problem is, unless you watched behind the scenes and the right footage, you won't know they exist. Right. They actually were taking the piss out of the guy who plays the Cyclops, because he was going on about how he's doing all his own stunts and training in the gym, and the guy's behind him shaking his head, and the guy that's actually standing in for him. So a lot of those scenes were actually done by stunt people, but what they were required to do is they still had to drive the horses. The actors had to drive the horses down into the box canyon. And then the director, Peter, had instructed them, do not drive them right down to the bottom where it's all muddy, because you're going to have a hell of a time down there. Make sure you drive them just to this section here so you can actually try to get onto them. Otherwise, and we'll do our footage right there. And then there were a couple of scenes where, unfortunately, Liam Neeson gets himself into a really awkward position and has no choice but to hang on to the neck of the horse, or get crushed by all of the horses that are around.
That's kind of what I'm referring to. Is like, definitely Liam Neeson is in shit in that scene. And you're like, he handles it really well. He's obviously been around horses and knows how to handle horses. You got to kind of like grab them and just move them if you're big enough to do so. But that could have gone real bad real fast.
And the funny thing is, Clydesdales had not been ridden for 500 years since people had stuck
since Frisian war horses.
And
the closest you'll see is Rutger Hauer riding a Frisian horse in Lady Hawk, which is impressive as hell.
Yeah, it was hilarious because they were saying, like, we had to retrain like 16 horses, Clydesdales, into actually taking the rider.
Yeah,
and they said they actually picked it up really well.
They
And
do. They are quite placid, nice natured horses. Yeah.
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 And the actress who never gets to actually have a scene riding the horse. Is it Lisette Anthony?
Yes.
They call her Lit, apparently, the other actors. Lit or Lisette was really good with the horses. She picked it up really fast, and she said they just don't have any bad habits, so they're fine. And so everybody else was really struggling with these horses, because particularly the poor boy, he's, it's huge compared to him.
Getting your legs around a Clydesdale is the difficult thing, because you're like literally sitting on top of a big flat animal surface. It's like trying to ride an elephant or a rhino or something rather than a regular
Didn't
horse.
they use treadmills as well for the super speed effect?
Yeah, they had they even had a couple of treadmills side by side with the horses, so you could see a couple of them, 3 of them, I think a maximum, riding at the same time, and they would just have the background. It's not great in terms of special effects.
No,
but can you imagine actually using real horses and trying to film this?
It's adequate. It still does the job.
Adequate.
Adequate.
Yeah. So I did the math because even though I can't pronounce things very well, I'm very good at math, and I have a dungeon master brain that loves math. So Rel does mention that they can travel 1,000 leagues in a day. So a league is normally around 3 to 4 miles, meaning they could travel around 3,500 miles or 5,000 kilometers a day at a speed up to 145 miles per hour or 250 kilometers an hour.
That's impressive.
That is fast. That is fast.
All things considered, it's probably fast enough to kick up some sparks if your hooves are hitting the ground. If you got shod hooves, for sure. And they do run across quite a lot of grassland, so it does kind of make sense.
I wonder what the fire budget was.
I don't know.
All of the fire damage they had to pay for, where all the fields got catch on fire.
Pinewood Studios sounds flammable.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
and the Foley sound is not that great in that scene where like the animals are supposed to be running on the ground. You hear the deep thunder of their hooves hitting the ground, and then it like stops when they're supposed to be flying. They don't really match up particularly well with the flyover of the train that they're doing with whatever microlight that they had a camera mounted to.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The awesomeness of the scene is not detracted by that, really.
So I guess this film was also similar to Flash Gordon because it was filmed a combination of England and Italy, I guess, but it did have an English crew. So it was filmed. 10 sound stages were used at Pinewood Studios in England, but all the exterior shots were filmed in Italy.
Yeah.
Also shared a couple of stages with James Bond, or known as the 007 stage.
Yeah, the biggest one in the Northern Hemisphere. Let's talk about Peter Yates, the director.
Yeah.
Because Peter Yates was actually, at the time, well established, a very capable filmmaker. Yep. And I believe Columbia was concerned with trying to find somebody who could direct a film of this complexity because it had a lot of special effects.
So, Peter Yates is most known for his 1968 cult classic film Bullitt with Steve McQueen, which is famous for its iconic car chases. And he also did The Deep, which is a 1977 underwater adventure based on Pete Benchley's novel. And Pete Benchley is known as the guy that wrote Jaws. So they were kind of his two big films. Yeah, this is his first kind of jump into, I guess, fantasy or science fiction.
Yeah. It's the first time he had to do something that was fantasy and required him to use his imagination. And Peter did, comment on that he liked the idea of having to use his imagination and get out of his comfort zone. But he did also state that there were some serious struggles for him to get his vision for Krull established. He had a script, but it was constantly getting rewritten for sometimes to do with Columbia wanting certain things in the movie, and sometimes things that he was having to change because it was going to be too costly, or it wasn't going to make much sense, or there were so many people involved in the construction of this film, and the vision for the movie was constantly changing. So Peter's had a rough time in the production of this. It
Mm.
was so complex, and I think Peter had said ultimately it was his worst experience making a movie ever.
Yeah.
It had promise at the beginning, but at the end he was so frustrated with the whole thing.
Yeah, there was no clear direction. There was no clear direction from the executives who had all the purse strings about
Yeah.
exactly what they were after. So it
Yeah,
was a bit of a mess.
I think the problem is he came on, he came onto the project, and if he had been given the script and said, "Okay, now make it your own," it would have been all right. But there were so many people at the top trying to make adjustments and changes, which is why we get some really stupid things happening in the film. He went on holiday in the middle of the production,
Yeah.
because he was under so much pressure.
Yeah, he was having a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had a lot of yeah, it was definitely like stealing from a lot of different genres.
Yeah.
It was trying to be a Star Wars film, essentially.
It was trying to be a Star Wars, Flash Gordon, Excalibur, King Arthur. It was trying to be a lot of those different things, which is fine. That's not the issue with the film, honestly. There's a lot of other things that are a problem. We need to talk about Ron Silverman, that producer, as well,
Sure.
because Ron was clearly not very good at establishing the film's organization around the financial responsibility. It was not well organized, that production, and that's his job, to make sure it is. To make sure that the script is ready to go, the sets are going to be ready to go and set, that they have, not spent too much money, and there were so many problems. Ron did not do a great job, because a lot of those sets, they had 23 sets, of which many of them did not need to be bloody sets. They could have just used real locations, and it would cost them so much less. They're filming in England. There are plenty of locations that could have stood in this film. But also, too, they rebuilt sets. They would make a change to the script, and the set's already mostly done, and they had to scrap it and start again. And this would happen quite a bit, which is why it went from 20 million as a budget up to almost $50 million. Or
I was
40.
looking like that scene when they first enter the castle to raid the wedding, and that door falls down. That looks like a real fucking door, like that, the weight in it and everything. And I was like, that was probably like $10,000 just for that fucking door.
Yeah,
you could see. I mean, visually, it's got some stunning set pieces. I feel.
Oh, it does. It has. It's got some great. I mean, they put money into some of the best parts, but then there are certain things where they really did not need a set.
Do you want to
build
talk
an
about
entire set for something like that?
Some of the effects that they used and stuff?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they had to do a few things that were new, but they used some old techniques as well.
So the Beast's animatronic suit was apparently a groundbreaking achievement, because it was the first ever self-contained animatronic suit with full facial movement and an internal movement for lungs, heart, and body fluids, all without external cables.
Yeah. Animatronics and prosthetics. I think it's Nick Marley's team was responsible for that. I watched a video and he explained the whole process of the Beast, and even the Cyclops was partly animatronic and prosthetics as well.
Yeah.
And
the Beast doesn't stand out though to me. Like, he is not memorable at all. Like, his design.
I always felt the Beast was incredibly memorable and terrifying. I always found that when I watched it in the theater, absolutely scared the bejesus out of me. And when the glaive stuck in his chest,
his hands got me with the extra fingers and stuff. Yeah, it was very Geiger-esque the way that he was designed.
He had 12 fingers. Then he was also mentioning too the Slayers. So Nick in his video was explaining about the Slayers, because the Slayers were originally designed and made by a different company that was dropped after the final product was considered unusable, because they just looked like people wearing rubber suits. They looked awful. And Nick had gone with the director or the producer, I think it was the director, to look at the suits as they were producing them partway through the process. And they eventually, Nick wound up doing it. He had said that he was not going to do the Slayers. And the reason being is there were so many effects and suits and things that had to be done by his team, there wasn't going to be time for him to do all those jobs. Because unfortunately, even though production started back in 1980 and it was released in 1983, the special effects teams started very late because the script was constantly getting changed. So Nick looked at it. They decided the suits were useless. Nick redesigned the Slayers in like 12 days or something stupid like that. It was very, very quick. It was a rush job. He didn't like the design of the Slayers himself. Nick thought they were terrible and his team really didn't have enough time to focus on them. But they did the best they could. And surprisingly, I think Nick gives himself a hard time on the Slayer suits, but I actually think they are one of the most outstanding aspects of the entire movie myself. Yeah. We should talk about Stanford Sherman's screenplay.
Yeah. So while we're on the Slayers, I also picked up that the death screams, they were sourced as Maya shrieks from a 1976 film called At the Earth's Core, which is based on a Edgar Rice Burroughs novel.
They're based on what?
Maya shrieks from a film called At the Earth's Core, a 1976 sci-fi film that was based on a Edgar Rice Burroughs. Yeah, apparently Maya is like a what are they called?
Pterodactyl?
Pterodactyl type sort of monster. I've never heard of this film before.
Well, here's the thing though. This happens with Edgar. Edgar has inspired so many people, and
it's got Peter Cushing in it. So
yeah, they often don't remake his books because he's got some outstanding books. Because for whatever reason the estate for Edgar Rice Burroughs is always put such a high price on everything that he has. Somebody just goes off and just copies what he's done and makes another story or movie or whatever. George Lucas copied Edgar Rice Burroughs all over the place for Star Wars, and not just the Fortress, but a lot of the Bantha. There's a lot of stuff that comes up.
Those streaks were pretty memorable, though.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they definitely were.
Yeah. And also, the Black Fortress was filmed upside down for its destruction, with the footage reversed for that effect. So
I believe it was Derek. Is it Mennings?
Yes.
From the James Bond movies, his team were responsible for that unusual fortress spaceship traveling, teleporting, and bizarre destruction.
Yeah.
I'm all for it though, because it kind of makes sense that it's an alien thing, and it nicely tidies up the plot point. There's nothing left behind.
And apparently Peter Yates also used to like to use lots of loud sounds and surprises to get authentic reactions from his actors, and he even stood in for the Beast by wearing a bucket on his head.
I did hear something about. Remember they had that the floor opened up, and that was when Titch fell through, and Ergo went with him to protect him. That and Colwyn went down there on a rope sort of thing, and then had to come back up again, and barely managed to grab his sword scabbard up out of there in time. He was terrified of that thing, that he was going to get crushed by the hydraulics, because it wasn't, I don't think, under manual control. So he was feared for his life there.
He did. I think he did get quite partly crushed by it, because they did the timing for it to close back up based off the stuntman, and of course he was slower than the stuntman, and so he said he kind of got pinched a bit in the process and a little bit crushed.
Bloody hell!
Yeah, it's not a smart way to move. Having a
There's one thing that's coming apparent as we're going through these older films that we love is fucking health and safety was just didn't exist.
Cowboys,
man. Yeah. I also believe there was, I can't remember who did the stop motion for the giant crystal spider, but I know that Derek Medding's team spent a lot of time dressing the location of the web.
It was just him animating it, I think, and it took him 5 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty big job.
He had to redo it or something.
The glaive, that magical weapon, the hero glaive itself is one-sided, if you didn't know. It's literally it's only on one side. It's only going to be filmed from one angle. So they just had, if you look at the back of it, it's basically just a rubber bands attached to a pin that pulls the blades out, and then you release it, and you press this button at the back, and the blades pop out. It's a really simple design. They said it took a while for them to figure out how to do it so it would work, but it just wound up being pins and a channel and rubber bands, and that was it.
It's an iconic weapon as well.
Yeah,
so
it is.
cool.
Yeah.
So and Lisette Anthony, is that her name? Lisette. She was only 17 during the filming, and the producers ended up dubbing her voice in a lot of places to make her sound more mature.
Yeah, I would like to talk more about her, but can we finish talking about Mr. Stanford Sherman's script and that music and the editing? Because Stanford's script or screenplay was rewritten so many times. This is why the movie feels like it's a bit of a mess.
Feels like Star Wars.
Yeah, because it's literally, it had, the script for for Krull was different stories almost completely, and they just mishmashed and sort of smashed them together and took bits from there and here, and so the original might have been all right, but you'd never know because nobody actually knows that there was supposed to be like two key scripts that were squeezed together to make Krull. But that was rewritten so many times with so much input from everybody else. It's a horrible mess, which is why the story at times is not great. There are some serious holes in the plot,
it's got
and the logic.
Real plot holes and continuity problems.
Yeah, and just making sense problems. And then, of course, it's compounded by the editing by Ray Lovejoy, who did the film. If you watch this film, and I don't dispute that this film has got some great scenes and aspects, but a lot of it is not tight. There are many scenes that are really long, and create a rather boring aspect to the story and a slow pace. And the pace of the film is improved not by the scene itself, but by something else. This film is actually meant to be a swashbuckling, fast action adventure, and it's not. And it's because Ray's editing's not great. It's not great. It's James Horner's composition and his classic, thrilling, rousing, and elevating music that saves a lot of the movie and elevates it, because the scenes themselves are paced so poorly. It's the music that's sort of driving it, I found.
Yeah, they definitely went for a Star Wars vibe by, Star Wars is known for its John Williams score, so they got Horner. So they struck gold getting Horner, man. This film, I don't think this film would if it didn't have Horner's score, I don't think we'd be talking about it.
No, I don't think we would. And I think that a lot of people would have, I think there'd be a lot less than 16, 17 million coming from that movie. I think it'd be a lot less. Yeah. AJ's fallen asleep.
Yeah.
So Lisette Anthony, you were talking about her. Do you know, I when I saw that movie the first time in the theater, I could not understand why this young woman who I really liked, she was only a little bit older than me really at the time, so very appealing, and then she talks and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I didn't realize till later on that she was dubbed by Lindsay Cowles, a 30-something-year-old American actress, and because an exec decided that even though almost the entire crew had a British accent, that because Ken had an American accent, they wanted Lisette to have an American accent because Americans wouldn't watch the movie if it had a female lead that wasn't American with an American accent. So let's use a younger woman, since Lindsay doesn't look anywhere near as good as Lisette, frankly, and use her voice. It just doesn't fit the character. And when you do something that that desperate to a film, dubbing does not improve films. it takes away so much of the portrayal of the character, right? I
Yeah.
honestly, when I was listening behind the scenes to her voice and how she would say things, I was like, that would have been so much better.
Yeah.
It's just-
Didn't you want to talk about her, AJ, about her portrayal of woman in this?
no, he's sleeping.
Just that she had a part, she had a role in the movie, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
She wasn't just, there occasionally going, she was actually negotiating. She was talking. She was fighting with the beast. He was trying to negotiate with her. He was trying to control her, and she was refusing. So she was showing strength and mettle. She was fighting a quest in her own way too, and fighting a fate of their planet. She could accept and save everyone, and bow down and marry the beast and become his regent. But live in a gilded cage essentially. Or she could hold out, and everyone she knew would die because the beast was unkillable. And he's saying that's essentially the choice he's giving you. It's like, you can rule the galaxy, or I'll just destroy this planet and everyone on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I think about some of the positives of this movie, Lisette's portrayal and that character is one of the outstanding aspects, because the fact is, when Lisette was playing the character Lissa, she had the answer all along and tried to convince Colwell, no, we need to be together. We are stronger together. We can defeat the beast and the Slayers. Don't send me off. And she was right.
Yeah.
So she was not just trying to convince, she was trying to convince her lover and husband and her family, and finds herself now basically, I would say, doing a bit of espionage with the beast. And yeah, I honestly, and it's interesting how the story also portrays Lissa is really the mastermind behind the arranged marriage. Colwell agrees, but Lissa, if you look very carefully at how the film is portrayed, it's actually Lissa and Colwell's idea to arrange marriage, not the parents, but Lissa is ultimately, in the end, trying to make this happen. She knows. And I thought that was an impressive aspect of the story that they tell.
So the beast's motivation basically is to fulfill the prophecy himself. So
yeah.
So by marrying her, having a kid, his child will rule the galaxy. Is that the big plan? It's kind of unclear.
It's really kind of a bit kinky, actually, if you ask me. But yeah. Do you know, it's funny, when Lisette Anthony hadn't done a lot of acting at the time. She hadn't done a big major movie when she was 17 for Krull. But after that, it did not stop her career. She's done a lot of very impressive stuff, and a lot of stuff that wasn't so great. But she's got a real sort of serious career in the UK. Like, a lot of people know her very, very well. And she continues to do quite well, frankly. Certainly better than Ken Marshall did. Ken Marshall didn't do great after Krull.
Deep Space Nine, I think was that what he did from memory?
Yeah.
He was in Star Trek, some sort of Star Trek. All right, should we wrap this up, because AJ's
well, I have more notes, dude. I took shitloads of notes on this thing. I got a whole bunch of stuff on all these actors as well, and some good things and some bad things, and a bit of a conclusion. I wasn't expecting to spend so much time just talking about the story synopsis.
Yeah, no. Okay. You're right.
Do we want to keep
AJ?
going?
You want to keep? You're right to keep going, mate?
Oh no, I'm out.
He's out. Yeah.
I'll catch you later, everybody.
All right, see you later, buddy. I thought we would be breaking down this movie a lot more rather than just talking about the plot.
But I do apologise. So AJ has he works odd hours, and he usually comes onto this podcast after being up all night doing his YouTube stuff. So
and he just released a video too after working yesterday, so it didn't help. Ken Marshall, Colwell, or Coleman, or whatever the hell you want to call him. It's a terrible name. There's a few real terrible names.
Yeah, Lissa, it's a horrible name.
Lissa gets called Lisa by a lot of people. Colwyn is another terrible name. Main hero, I would say, I hate to say it, I think Ken's pretty average in terms of his acting skill. But what you can't dispute is you can tell he's trying very hard during the film. And
Yeah.
if you look at the behind the scenes, he's really is working as hard as he possibly can. He did a few of his own stunts and got injured doing so. And this movie killed his career. He was actually an up and coming star. He's probably going to wind up being one of the A-listers in the UK and America. And Krull just brought that to a halt, and he never really recovered from it after that, which is a shame.
He was physically fit. He looked like a lead actor. He did strike me as that Errol Flynn, Robin Hood type. That's what they were going for.
Yeah, and
maybe Harrison Ford. I don't know. Yeah.
And that's why they selected him. I believe Peter Yates selected him for that very reason, because he felt like he was a physical swashbuckler type, like Errol Flynn. Freddie Jones, the old wise man, probably the worst acting in the entire film comes from Freddie, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's not all his fault. I think it's partly because the way he presents things, but if you look at the lines that he gives, it's horrendous dialogue that he is given. The dialogue the dialogue from the other characters is much better. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's engaging, sometimes it's sarcastic. Or sometimes it just makes sense. That's what you would expect somebody to say. It's good dialogue, but his is by far the worst written character of all of them. I almost feel like you didn't even need his character in many respects. It could have been filled by a different person, like the Emerald Seer. And the narration, his role as the narrator is shit. Like, it's really not good. And I've already said that, but yeah, not great.
Yeah, he is the exposition device of the film.
Yeah,
that's his only purpose.
Yeah, it hurts his career, honestly, as an actor, and it hurts the movie a lot by having it take place. David Bartley as Ergo. I mean, we were talking about how that bumbling magician was brilliant. He's brilliant. Some of the comic relief in there is mildly amusing, but it's got that dry English subtle humour as well, which is very similar to a New Zealand sense of humour. So, which is why it sort of appealed to me, and I imagine other New Zealanders as well. Ergo even has a decent character development. Like, not only is he comic relief, but he actually, as a character, develops. He cares for no one when he starts off, and eventually he's looking after an orphan while helping to save the world from the Slayers, which is completely opposite to his normal character.
Yeah. Both Ergo and Rel are my two favourite characters on this film.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and it's because they're caring as well. And when you're watching it, and you are like, we were probably around that age of the kid, Twitch, so you always kind of generate to those charismatic characters that are kind of assholes, but they're nice. There is some development there as well. So
yeah, well, I was a bit older than Titch, but Bernard Bresslaw. Is it Bernard Bresslaw who played the Cyclops? So, probably one of my favorite characters in the entire movie. He saves the hero, saves the party from disaster. He's a compelling part of the whole story, and I still feel like that the arc of his character, unfortunately, his death feels really contrived. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost as if, like, there's a story, a play, a book called Death of a Salesman, and what it does is they do this with this character, is they basically tell you the outcome of this character. This salesman is going to die, and what they basically do at the very beginning is they say this Cyclops is going to die, and that's not a good thing to do to a character that people love. Do you know what I mean? I think it was too contrived. I think if they were going to have him die, they needed to make sure they didn't tell us about it till later.
Yeah.
Till it was closer to that time, when it actually does happen. I think there was just too much of his backstory dropped in as exposition. It kind of ruined it for me. Yeah. I can literally remember crying when he died.
Yeah, it's very dramatic.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the sense, I guess they didn't test this and know that he would end up being a fan favourite, and possibly if they knew that, they would have kept him alive or kept his death more sort of,
Undercover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I know you have that constant fear throughout the film that he is going to die at some point, and you just don't know when it is. But it's a heroic death, though. It gets him.
Yeah, it is definitely the way that he dies is really impressive, horrifying, but also very impressive. So is it Alan Armstrong as Torquil, the bandit leader?
Yeah, he's charismatic as well.
He's very charismatic. That he does a really good job of portraying the character, but the bandit leader just doesn't make sense to me. Why the heck does he join Colwyn and on this mission to the Black Fortress? He's already said, like literally, seconds ago, that he thinks it's a fool's errand, and just because somebody shows up with a key for his chains, and they're probably the prince. Why is that going to shift him? I always felt
he does that thing. There's that quite cool scene where he robs all the gems or the emeralds, from the seer. Remember, and then he's telling Liam Neeson, "Oh, we're rich," and he opens up, and they're like, "What are you talking about? It's just rocks."
Yeah,
and the seer's like chuckling in the background.
Yeah.
So he's obviously got motivations that he thinks that he's going to get rich.
Yeah.
Off this, because he has no interest in fame.
No, and I feel like the introduction of the bandits and the bandit leader Torquil could have been done better. I felt like the way that they did it, and the way and where they did it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, it's very similar to, I know Kevin Costner's Robin Hood came out years later, but it is very similar to that scene where he meets Little John and they have that fight on that log, and
well, that would have been better. Although they were then people would have accused the movie of being like Robin Hood. So
yeah. But it is very Robin Hood. It is the merry man. Yeah.
I almost feel like it would have been better for the bandits and the bandit leader to be prisoners in the dungeon of the castle where the Slayers attack, and they don't get killed because the Slayers can't be bothered going down in the bottom there and taking out all of their prisoners, and having Colwyn go down there and release them would have been a better introduction than the way they did it. But anyway, Graham McGarth as Titch, the little boy who's the apprentice to the Emerald Seer, is he's a nice counterpoint to the adult dialogue in this movie. And I think the reason for his inclusion in the story is to help move Ergo's character, but to also increase the audience's concern for the party, because the problem in the party is you kind of know that Colwyn is not going to die, and all the other members of the party are shits, so you don't really care if they die.
Yeah.
So you have to have somebody in the group who you care about, and the boy is as innocent and as nice as you can have, right? There's nothing particularly annoying about this kid. So I think that's part of what was going on there, is have the audience care for somebody.
Yeah, it's to help Ergo's character arc.
Yeah.
I believe, because that is a cool scene, that when he turns into the puppy. I like that dog as well. Was it a beagle?
Yeah.
Yeah, such a cute puppy as well.
Yeah.
Terrible haircut though.
Oh yeah, pretty bad.
Bowl cut.
Yeah, Liam Neeson as Keegan, the carefree rogue who cares for nothing but money, and he only ever really follows the quest because he follows whatever the leader does. He follows the hero because his leader does this, and he doesn't change. This character doesn't change. It's weird how his character progression, he follows Torquil, but he doesn't really change his mentality, yet he sacrifices himself in the end, not for the benefit of Colwyn or the mission, but for Torquil. He
Mm.
cares more about Torquil, and he's a really interesting grey character who winds up doing something that's good, but only because he thinks Torquil is important. And
He's trying to get out of paying lots of childcare, I think.
yeah, well, I suppose that could be it. That could be it. Yeah, yeah.
He's a man who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what about Robbie Coltrane?
He's kind of like Friar Tuck, isn't he? The jovial. Yeah.
And he's an odd character because he only again helps the hero because he does whatever Torquil tells him, even if he disagrees with it. But and he doesn't really do anything that sort of stands out, whether he says anything or does anything, until the very end. And as soon as he tries to go the extra mile in the end to storm the Beast Fortress, that is when he dies.
Yeah.
And it's strange that his reward for doing something is death, almost instantly, as soon as he tries to shift his character. Which I always thought was, man, they are callous with the characters in this movie. They kill a lot of people.
Yeah. Everyone dies.
Everybody dies. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's all for love. It's all for the good of the planet.
Mm.
It's a shit wedding in the end.
Yeah. It was. It didn't work out.
Yeah, shouldn't have RSVP'd.
Yeah. John Welsh, who played the Emerald Seer.
Yeah.
Honestly, I thought he did a great job of playing a wise man.
Yeah, his look is so classic and creepy. Yeah, because you got to remember, this is before we got Gandalf and Sauron and all that. He did just play that archetypical wizard, and that death scene of his is creepy, man, to me. Like the way he shudders, and everything. Oh, just And when he explodes, when the changeling version of him explodes, it's a different type of creature as well than the Slayers. It's like
the death of the changeling that transforms into the seer is horrible. It's horrible. And I mean horrible as in it's just the sound and the effects. They kind of feel a bit dated, but even now when I was watching it, it's like, God, it just makes me shiver inside when I think about it.
That's what I was surprised, like a G rating. So when I got this on iTunes, and I was like, oh, I got my kid to watch it with me, and then like halfway through, she's like, I don't want to watch this. It's going to give me nightmares.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, fair enough. I was like, how is this got a G rating?
Yeah. But the Emerald Seer gets better dialogue, I think, compared to Freddie Jones's character. And I think the Emerald Seer probably should have just replaced the old one, because having two wise men is sort of not necessary. It would have. I think it would have done the story. It would have been better to have it that way. I suppose they needed Freddie's character because of the Widow of the Web. To have that link with Francesca Annis's character, the Widow of the Web.
Yeah,
Francesca was like in her 30s, so 35, 38, something like that. She wasn't, and she's really attractive. Like if you see her in real life, which is pretty obvious in the film. But she has the most interesting character backstory out of everybody.
This film just has a lot of really good scenes that. I don't think it's a great film. Like I'd only give it like probably maybe a 3 out of 5. And mostly due to nostalgia, but it just has these really, really good moments in it. And it's just held together by really bad dialogue and a bad plot.
Yeah, I mean the fact that her character like kills her son, her child. It's the most unimaginable action you can think of either a father or a mother doing. But her character is very quick to sacrifice herself for the greater good. So we get a character who is probably the worst character you could imagine in the most horrendous location, but is very quick to redeem herself. And I always appreciated the fact that was there. It was really sad to think that those two would never get together. That they were doomed.
That's his best scene. That's Freddie Jones's best scene.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's very much so. Yeah. And I think his interaction with the widow is his best lines. They are still a little bit clunky, but they are definitely far better than a lot of the other lines.
Well,
that
just
he has.
the use of the sand is a really clever way just to add tension to that scene.
Yeah.
So
I made a list of problems with Krull, and I made a list of good things about Krull.
All right, go through it.
All right.
And I've got a couple of reviews that I wouldn't mind reading, which I thought were quite funny.
A lot of the sets were scrapped and rebuilt, as I said, because of the script rewrites. But when you watch the fight scenes, the choreography is
shocking.
It's so bad. It looks so fake.
Yeah. That opening fight scene is so terrible.
It is so boring. It was hard to watch it.
Yeah, he just that bit where he's pausing between his dad and his bride, like it's like he wasn't doing like. What are you doing, mate?
He's waiting. Do you know what I think the problem is? I think they couldn't make the fight scenes more exciting because the people in the suits for the Slayers probably couldn't see a damn thing.
Yeah.
So they probably can't move around or do very much very quickly. There's only one Slayer in that whole sequence in that castle that is terrifying, and that's the one that kills the guard that's trying to protect Lissa.
It's a cool scene. When they're taking her down the underground tunnel and they think it's all clear, and you can see the three of the three Slayers sitting above, and they drop down. I really like this. There's lots of scenes in this film that were just cemented in my brain.
Yeah,
for years.
They have potential. Yeah. But if you look at a lot of the scenes, like particularly the castle, the sets look clean with no indication of being used or worn. So they look like movie sets rather than they look like what they're supposed to be, like a castle or a forest or a swamp or a bunch of rocks. Like it's really strange how they've done that, and it's weird that you do something like that. You think about a film. This movie was actually shot in England, most of it, and there's so many castles in England that they could have used. Yeah. They didn't have to build one.
Yeah.
And they're really nice. They're not like broken down ruins. You can get some really good looking castles.
They only needed it for that wedding.
That's all they needed it for. I don't know why they bothered building a set for that. It just seems...
It makes sense that the Black Fortress is that kind of like vacant alien sort of vibe to it.
Yeah. And then the forest itself, like England has not got a shortage of forests. You can dig a hole in a forest in England and chuck some water and some corks in there and some sawdust, and nobody's going to mind. And
Game of Thrones completely filmed in Ireland. Yeah, plenty of landmarks there.
Yeah, and you can stick a pile of dig a pit and put water in it and stick a hoist at the bottom to have Slayers come up. It would have been even rocky landscape where they meet the bandits for the first time and Torquil. It looked horribly fake. It looked like Doctor Who stuff, like cardboard and polystyrene painted. Those are scenes which I find very frustrating, and I have no doubt they were expensive to actually put together because there's so many things that were. I want to talk about the love story because this is one of the things that as a kid I was actually looking for the love story in this, and it's just not convincing. And it's probably partly because of the dubbing, but I also think the introduction of Colwyn and Lissa is not great. The love story is really unconvincing.
It's an arranged marriage.
It's an arranged marriage, but they don't have a time. You're not convinced that they really give a shit about each other, really, because there hasn't been you haven't had a time to see a strong relationship build between them before the Slayers attack. I feel like the Slayers attacked them too soon, that it would have been fine to just have had them marry and be done with it, or have the marriage not take a place straight away, and at least give them a scene to interact with each other. I know they're trying to do that by the pillars in the castle, but it was such a poorly. It was such a poor scene. It was an awkward scene, and then it leads to suddenly a kiss, and it's yeah. I don't think they gave enough time to actually building up a stronger relationship that convinced you that they were actually romantically interested, and that there was, truly a strong interest in going and saving Alyssa from the beast.
Yeah. Like I said, he perked up pretty quick after losing his dad and his wife in the same day.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, you're right.
I guess we don't want a movie where the lead character's moping throughout the entire.
No.
It's not a John Wick film, is it?
No, that's right. Yeah, it's
we didn't a brooding hero. Yeah. So.
I was thinking about the Firemares, because the Firemares are great and also terrible in some respects. When you think about the Firemares, the idea of the Firemares is great. Them running along, running around on the land is great. But how do you catch a Firemare that can run faster than a human and flies?
I was immediately having flashbacks to fucking Star Wars. What's fucking one of my brain refuses? Rise of Skywalker, or the last one. Yeah. I just immediately was like, oh my god, I'm remembering that film again.
Yeah. In this film, when I was 12 years old, and I saw the Firemares running along the land, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And then suddenly the Firemares are running in the sky with no wings. It was so frustrating and cringy. And I was like, please, what the hell are you doing? You didn't need to do that. You had sold me. You didn't have to have them flying, and they're flying. And I'm like, that's one of the things that people take the piss out of the most in this film is the fact that they run so fast they literally look like they're flying. It's just a bit stupid.
I didn't mind it.
Yeah,
it was that because it just builds up to that scene, and then it leads up to the bit where they get to the fortress and they have to get to the fortress before it teleports. It's the precursor to the most exciting part of my film.
Yeah,
the most exciting part of the film to me. So I don't mind it, because I know, like you say, this film does have a pacing issue.
Yeah.
And so when we get to that scene, I'm like, we're getting to the bit that I really like. So I don't mind
it.
But
I always felt like those were things that could have easily been cut. And I mean, it would have saved them a bit of money too, trying to do the special effects for that sort of shit too. But anyway, the plot of the story is cliche. Like, people always comment on how cliche, with, how many horrible or horrendous plot holes there are and inconsistencies. But I think this is also one of those movies that was pushed by Columbia too fast. They really should have locked down their script and given their director enough time to make absolutely sure they were happy with what was going on. I think things moved way too quick. And that's probably why we get
every
those problems.
studio wanted a Star Wars on their hands.
And almost all of them were terrible.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the Star Wars clones, this was one of the better ones, I feel.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was trying to be a Star Wars clone. I think it was trying to be its own thing. It was so different to Star Wars, really. But the story itself was very similar in many respects, at its core. But the other
Star
aspects.
Wars combines samurai films and samurai western and sci-fi, whereas this went more medieval and sci-fi.
Yeah, this went sort of King Arthur, Excalibur, and
Robin Hood,
and a little bit of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon going on here as well, probably.
Yeah.
The dialogue of Krull is pretty
shocking,
basic, downright awful at times. And that could have easily been corrected. Like, just get rid of narration and get rid of the wise man's lines, because they're the worst aspect of this movie. And we've said this before, but I won't go into a lot of detail. I think you've pointed this out before. Like, the magical glaive is acquired too soon. He has this thing that is awesome and magical, and can kill pretty much anything apart from apparently the beast, and he never uses it until the very end.
Yeah. Well, they wanted a lightsaber, and at the time, ninjas were cool.
Mm-hmm.
Throwing stars. It was, you could see it was workshopped in a meeting. Like, we need a cool weapon. We need an Excalibur. We need a lightsaber.
Yep.
What's hot right now? We can't use. We don't want to use a laser sword. We've already got the bad guys. Already got lasers. At the time, kung fu films, ninja films are doing really well. Ninjas use. Let's do a throwing star.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was made sense.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's just, you think about, he gets that before he gets into any major fights. It's the first thing that winds up happening. It really should have been.
It wasn't a mission. It wasn't that hard for him to get it.
No.
He learns about it, and 5 minutes later, he's
climbing a mountain, and he's got it. It's like, that was easy. I feel like they should have changed the order in which he got the glaive. He should have got the glaive much later in the process. He should have picked up his army first, and then tried to find not so much the Black Fortress, but probably got the glaive then. After the interactions with the I don't know how you would time it, but here, having a powerful weapon like that and never using it until the very end is really hard for me as a 12-year-old when I watched it, and for everybody else that I came across, to understand what the heck is going on. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It
looks cool though.
It does. It's, I mean, I can't dispute.
It looked cool. It looked cooler on the poster and the cover of the movie than it did in the actual movie. And probably its best use is the opening credits.
Yeah. We got to talk about some of the most boring scenes. I would say some of the longest and boring scenes is the uncut version of the mountain climbing. I remember my grandmother leaning over and saying, "Are they going to show us him climbing the entire movie?"
You could see that's where a lot of that budget went, because that wouldn't have been cheap, because they were helicopter shots.
Yeah.
As well. Beautiful scenery. I guess you're going to show it. I mean, it's like I said before briefly. A lot of this film feels like a wallpaper, a computer wallpaper that you put on when like your computer goes to standby mode, just with spectacular James Horner music playing in the background.
Yeah. I was thinking in terms of, like, that scene went on and on. I'm like, it's a cool idea, but honestly, it's too long. You watch him climb from one side of the ridge to the other to get to the opening, and there's no cut scene. You watch the entire thing, and he's there's just too many scenes of him climbing the mountain.
Tight leather pants with his bloody sword hanging out.
Yeah. The other one, I mean, I think the fire mares riding through the sky was way too long. I think the fire mare scene was a bit long. There's some great stuff there. You got the idea. I think they spent too long showing it off. I thought the Slayer forest ambush was kind of a bit long too. Like, it didn't really have the pacing that it needed. It certainly felt like we were slow. And the Slayers assaulting the castle siege, sieging the castle at the beginning. We've mentioned just how slow and boring that was. I think, God, they needed to get the actors to be moving a bit faster and doing stuff a bit quicker, or they just needed to cut away a lot more and a bit faster to get things tidied up. Heck, even entering the Beast Fortress before the Cyclops shows up is kind of boring and slow too. It doesn't really do very much for me. Those are the things that I sort of thought about when I was watching it. Did you notice too, like, there's something weird about this movie, in that many of the characters in the story know far too much about the Beast. They seem to know everything. Heck, I'm surprised they don't even know what size underwear he wears. Do you know what I mean? And what his credit card number is. They know way too much about the Slayers and other aspects of other characters in the story. Like, everybody seems to know so much about everybody. It's the exposition.
So is the Beast been to Krull before? Because
there's
no sort of time Yeah, it's hard to judge the time on this film, but it looks like it only happens over a few days,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah,
beast arrives,
yeah,
takes the bride, and then
yeah.
then they're there in a couple of days later. So, but is that he's obviously been there before in the past, or
I don't know. It's hard to know. Like
because in the
how do
in
they
the
know?
beginning it's coming from space.
Yeah. How do they know? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
has he been here before? Do they find out from the Cyclops who told them about the beast? I mean,
How does the beast know about the prophecy?
yeah, it's
Why would the prophecy work for him? Like,
yeah.
is it like a galaxy wide prophecy then? I guess.
It feels like it's a prophecy that everybody knows about, and
Yeah.
you'd think the beast would know about it as well. Like,
Yeah.
but it's really strange just how much everybody seems to know. It takes away a
Why
lot of
did
the
why
unknown
does he
factor.
think? Yeah. Why does he think if he marries Lissa that his kid will rule the galaxy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Uh,
Um.
uh, and then commenting like on some of the things I didn't like some of the best stuff in this movie. I might be stabbing away at some of the scenes and sets, but the real mountain locations was really impressive. The real wilderness location, that Box Canyon, the Widow's Web, the Beast Fortress, inside and out, is some of the most amazing locations.
Yeah.
That they really are. I was also, we were talking about the Slayer's weapon design, but I think that their death, and we talked about before, it is some of the most original and clever design I've ever seen in a movie. It's really well thought out. I think, as AJ was pointing out, like that's some of the best stuff there. I think the key thing for me is like when you think about the magical glaive, do you think mind controlling flying buzzsaw?
Mm.
Because that's what my mind goes to.
I think boomerang.
Boomerang. You think boomerang?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a boomerang. I this has a lot of D&D stuff in it. I think you have to attune to it, and then it's like
Yeah.
a boomerang.
Yeah.
So
we were talking about the transformations of Ergo into animals. Like back in the day, I was 12 years old. I'd never seen anything like that. I could tell that it's a little bit odd, but it actually worked really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are the Slayers, are they like Daleks? Like there's like a little slug thing that's controlling sort of a robot type body? Is that?
I think that's what, AJ was mentioning that. I think he's probably right. I think that's exactly what was going on there, is that they are just some sort of parasitic thing that is in a sort of mechanized, mechanical, or probably more like a biologically engineered suit. Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen more on that, like more on the what they were. So
yeah.
All right.
I didn't get enough of Ergo too. Ergo was awesome. The spider's web was the most terrifying and tension building scenes I've ever come across. I found the scenes with the beast really good for me back then. Do you remember the spike trap too that they get involved in? I like the concept until it starts stopping and starting, and I'm like, okay, now they're playing with me. But before that, when it starts off, I'm like, oh shit, that's screwed. I always really like that scene when it starts off until we get the knife on the ground and the crawling around, and it gets a little bit sort of silly at that point, but contrived. But and the glaive being able to cut through multiple slayers in seconds with no trouble was awesome.
There was some inconsistency in that as well.
Yeah,
like some of the slayers would scream and some wouldn't.
Yeah. They used a lot of lightning effects when there were battles taking place.
That was a big thing in the 80s as well. Highlander is notoriously bad for lightning effects as well.
Yeah,
I think that must have been a cheap CGI thing you could do back then.
Yeah,
a lot of films used it.
Well, I guess the last things I would say is like the film critics despise this movie. They tore it to
Mm.
shreds. You know, they found every problem with it, and there were so many problems to find that I think it on Rotten Tomatoes it got a 35%, and the audience is about 50% in terms of liking the movie or not. As a teenager, I was really disappointed because I had high hopes for this movie, and I could see moments that are brilliant and the potential of the story, but it just wasn't done. It wasn't delivered very well. And I actually think that if this movie was retooled and done again, I would change the story a little bit. I think it would be more interesting for Lissa to be told by Colwell to escape, and for the Slayers to take out her guards, but for her to escape, and then help Colwyn gather his army, travel with the group to the Black Fortress to kill the beast, rather than rescuing her from the Black Fortress, but to deliberately be part of the group. I think Lisette Anthony, with those other actors, would have really brought it to another level. It would have been far more interesting and a lot more fun and less cliche, because you could see that character being ballsy enough to take somebody on. And maybe destroying the beast together with the fire, rather than it just being, oh, let's give it to to Ken's character, Colwyn, and burning. I think together that would have been a much more impactful story if it gone that way.
So speaking of reviews, I jumped onto Letterboxd, which is are you aware of this website or this app?
Yeah, I heard of it. Yep.
It's basically a social platform for sharing people that like movies. And I thought I'd check out other people's reviews. I thought I'd get a variety of, people that didn't like it and people that did like it. So, okay, so this is from a user called Cinema Void. It's like watching a first-time DM test run a campaign of level 2 party searching for a +5 fidget spinner to fight a space goblin. 1.5 stars.
It's pretty funny.
This is a D&D game. There is so much you could steal from this.
Actually, they had to plan this to be a Dungeons and Dragons movie, but Gary Gygax said that he didn't remember anybody coming to him or to TSR to try to turn this movie into a licensed D&D movie. So
I like the +5 fidget spinner.
Yeah.
Jack, I guess you had to be there. 2 stars. Yeah. There's a lot of these films we're going to cover. I'm not going to apologise. There is a sense of nostalgia to these as well. These might not necessarily be good films. And there's nostalgia. And I'm not going to apologise for that because I like it. It makes me feel good. So, Parker, this movie has the perfect amount of scary quicksand scenes. 2.5 stars.
Yeah.
It does have a lot of quicksand.
You almost feel like the quicksand scene was unnecessary in many respects, because I don't think the one who gets sucked into the quicksand, you don't even know him.
No,
he's a nothing.
That's a scary scene, mate. It's a scary scene.
Anyway,
Chuck Dowling, everything about this film is top notch except the experience of watching it. 2.5 stars.
Oh dear! I think that might have been the response of my Uncle Grant. Actually, it's like, I don't know what the heck I was watching here, but I don't want to ever have to go through that again. I think that might have been his response.
You can't argue with it.
No, because it's hard not to. Yeah.
Someone that just simply goes by the name of Joe. This is clearly shooting for Star Wars, but ends up being closer to one of those Harry Hastings. Is that how you say his name?
Harry Housing
That said, it isn't lacking in visual integrity and spectacle. It's one of those movies that really makes you lament how those fields have almost entirely been ceded to CGI today. It's kind of a slog, but I'd love to have experienced it on the big screen. 3 stars. So,
Well, I experienced it on the big screen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a beautiful looking film.
It is a beautiful looking film. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, when it's not a beautiful looking film, but fortunately, I wouldn't say that an enormous amount of the film is looks shit. It's not. Yeah.
Comrade Yui, 1 part Excalibur, 1 part Master of the Universe, 2 parts stupid. Krull is a bad film with a great vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
He calls himself the Burke Nation. This movie slaps, an absolute banger from beginning to end. Peter Yates unabashedly mixes a potent cocktail of every science fiction and fantasy trope with heavy inspiration from the Dune novels and Star Wars. The end result is Krull. It's a B-tier Princess Bride that takes itself way too seriously but somehow manages to still be fun. 4 stars.
Yeah. I think when people start talking about it takes from Star Wars, really what it's taking from is Edgar Rice Burroughs, Barsoom novels, and from primarily from there, because and the fortress that Star Wars was based off.
It was quite hard to find any 5-star reviews for this, actually.
Yeah,
But I
because
found
you
one.
won't. I did. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Finlay. Lava pits, giant spiders, cyclops, floating crystals, invisible fortresses, big fucked up demon dudes, hyperspeed horses that go on fire, James Horner's score, and people from EastEnders. If you don't like Krull, it's because you're dead. 5 stars.
Well, there is a cult following. It's not a huge one, but there are a lot of people who really like Krull, warts and all. Like, and I think it's because it's very much a British thing. Sometimes the British do cling to certain things with a tenacity. It's like Doctor Who. Like, Doctor Who's been good and bad over time, but Doctor Who's far more popular in the UK than it is in America, and always has been. And it's been able to get away with a lot of stuff, even when the story's not so great, the special effects aren't that great, and the dialogue is a little bit off. In the UK, they have been much more open to the, I guess, the B/C grade experimental film concept, or even TV series.
There's a lot of character actors in here, and I guess, like that comment about EastEnders, I guess if you lived in the UK, there's probably a lot of those bandits that we didn't know were quite popular at the time on UK television.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it did have a really good cast, apart from the leads.
Yeah. I mean, look, Lisette Anthony is, even though she hadn't done a major film and she was very new to acting, she's actually not a bad actor. It just the dubbing over of her voice is like eliminated 50 to 75% of her portrayal of the character, and that's part of the problem, right? I think it would have been far better if they'd left her voice in. I would love to see a version where they did not have the dubbing taking place, and it was just Lisette's voice and portrayal.
I think this film, could done from another edit, maybe get it down, because it's almost 2 hours.
Yeah, it's too long.
It doesn't need to be 2 hours.
No, absolutely not.
No.
And it would vastly improve it. It really would make a huge difference. Get rid of all that stupid narration. Get rid of the talk of the prophecy all the time, and eliminate some of the scenes that were a bit long or focused too much on stuff. It wouldn't be a perfect movie. I don't know about you, but would you like to see Krull only ever been made once, or would you like to see a remake of Krull?
There's some stuff I think I'd like to have had maybe a novelization that explained a bit more of the lore, just because I'm kind of nerdy like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a one and done. I quite like that it was a one and done, and it's just a film that's made up of really good scenes to me.
Yeah,
and watching those scenes again, they still hold up. Like
Yeah.
those moments that I love about the film are still really good, but it's not a great film.
No, it's not.
No.
I honestly, I would love to see the Krull made again. And if they
Yeah.
take the best elements of Krull and they ditch the stuff that really didn't work for it, I think it could be a fantastic movie.
Mm.
But I also have to acknowledge that even though I would love to see a remake of Krull, I doubt that it would be ever successful. It's just
Yeah.
because the type of genre that it is so bizarre that I just don't think it will find an audience unless you can really sell that love story. Do you know what I mean? If you
Mm.
can really sell that love story and you can really kick up the pace of the movie so that it feels far more fast-paced action, I think it would work.
Yeah. I mean, this film succeeded due to, VHS video stores.
Yeah, that's where it found its market.
And word of mouth.
Yeah.
So I guess that's now streaming, isn't it?
Well, it won't be on
So-
streaming because the movie is not watched a lot on streaming, unfortunately.
No,
So
but
it's going to die on DVD. I've got the DVD, but DVDs are on their way out. So I think a lot of these, movies that found life after their theatrical release are going to never make it on streaming. I think they'll die when they go to streaming. They'll put on streaming. They won't get the audience, and then they'll pull them off because that's what they do all the time. And you'll not be able to get it from anywhere else because it won't be available because it'll be locked behind a door.
I mean, it is a film that people know, so
yeah,
it's an IP that could be remade.
Yeah,
I don't know how big an audience it would, how much love there is for it to draw that. I mean, I know they've tried that stuff with Willow, and they've tried that stuff with The Dark Crystal, which I probably feel has got better reputations than this film, and both those projects have failed and been cancelled.
They were TV series though. And they were done by
that's
Disney.
That's probably where they'd go with it. They'd probably...
I don't think it would make a good TV series. I think it would make a much better to just be like an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, and just trim it all back, speed it all up a bit, get things moving, change the order of certain things just so it makes a bit more sense, and get rid of some of the sillier things that didn't really work, that lost people, and
get rid of some of that fucking. Put in some fast travel and just give us a little bit more lore about the Glaive and the Beast and the Slayers.
Well, I mean, you can give it lore, but I think that was the problem with it, is there's too much exposition. I think ultimately what they needed to go is the way of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Fast action, not a lot of... I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark does not have a lot of dialogue. It is just action-filled, crazy shite, tension building, and I think that's what this movie needs to be to really sell it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. I think we'll finish it up there. I didn't expect to talk for 2 hours about it, but here we go. Okay, now.
Yeah.
All right. We talked about it as long as the film. Could have done a running commentary.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone. I think AJ, he mentioned talking about Big Trouble in Little China, so I don't know if we're going to do that next week.
Okay.
That's another favourite of mine. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining us, and it's good night from me.
And it's good night from the Beast.
My love is fire.